What's the best luck you have ever had in your life? My car broke down on a 2-lane highway in the middle of the Appalachians, 20 miles from the closest city with no cell reception. The first vehicle around the bend was my grandfather, who lived 3 hours away. He had randomly decided to go on a weekend trip to the mountains. From breakdown to being picked up was less than 5 minutes. I just want to say, I did read that comment that said I've been saying Appalachians wrong. It's a regional thing, I think. I'm Canadian, so I pronounce it the British way. Appalachians, I think, is a more, American way of saying it. So sorry, it's just the way I say it. Story 2. Applied for a job that was way out of my league, and the pay was more than twice what I was making at the time and included pension, full benefits, all that good stuff. I showed up quite early for the interview and had some time to burn, so I sat in the lobby reading some industry magazines. One article was about the top 10 threats to the industry, which I made a point of reading and soaking in as much as I could. Eventually, I get called into the interview and everything is going okay for the most part. This industry and role are both new to me, and I think it may have shown during the interview as a weak spot. But then I get asked, what do you see as potential issues within our industry/business? I was so excited I almost jumped out of my seat. I went off in great detail about everything I had just read. The interviewers were very impressed, and little did they know, had I been asked the same question just 30 minutes earlier, I would have had nearly nothing to say. I got the job. I would argue that this is only part luck. It seems that OP has a drive to learn things and be prepared for certain situations, which is a good quality to have in most jobs. This sounds like an office job, so I'll say office jobs. And I know it's like super, overdone or whatever, but OP does kind of sound like they have a go-getter attitude, which is probably good for the job. Story 3. Worked at a retail store for luggage where it was base pay plus commission. The other 2 salespeople were lazy as hell. They made almost no sales, didn't interact with the customers, and basically leaned against the counter sipping coffee and being fake friends with the manager lady. My first week there, I made more commission than they did in an average month. Manager lady was a super jerk, kept cutting my hours. Said I was making her look bad by making so many sales. Gave me all the crap jobs like taking out the trash every goddamn day because I was the only male and was stronger, she said. Cleaning the bathrooms twice a day, cutting into my sales, reassigning my sales to other people so it looked more even, etc. I lasted 3 months before the fake friends talked enough crap about he is stealing our sales that the manager fired me. 3 months later, I'm working with a company that's flipping houses. We get a call from a landlord about a house they wanted to sell because the tenants weren't paying, and being a landlord was more of a pain in the butt than he thought. When we get there, guess who is the tenant? Yeah, the manager that fired me. I straight bought her house for cash and evicted her. Okay, in a lot of cases, I think buying up a property outright and then evicting the person just to flip it later, it's kind of scummy. If they're already behind on rent payments and whatever, I kind of get it. But for her, yeah, I can feel no remorse. I can live with this. This is good to me. Story 4. As a young, dumb teenager, I was free soloing a small mountain without a safety harness. I was about 20 meters, 65 feet off the ground when I reached what I thought was the top. Turned out the top was still going upwards, and the surface was smooth as a baby's bottom, with nothing to grab onto. I tried to descend, but got myself stuck. After a few minutes, I couldn't hold on any longer. I lost my grip and I fell. I dropped 5 meters, 16 feet, and by chance, 2 tiny trees growing out from a crack in the mountain face caught me, and they did so perfectly. One under my arm and the other right under one of my knees. From there, I found my way down again, safe and sound. If it hadn't been for those trees, I could have been seriously injured. Or dead, as the ground underneath me was littered with pointy rocks. I didn't use my luck to win the lottery, but it saved me from a real bad situation. Story 5. Not getting crushed or drowned in a farm accident. I was 16 and working in the packing house on a blueberry farm. I went out to the fields with a guy to pick up the berries. The truck didn't have a cab, just a windshield. I was sitting on a fuel tank where the passenger seat would normally be. There was a large ditch full of water on the right side of the road. The driver went off the road into the ditch. I went into the water and the truck rolled over and came down on top of me. Somehow, I wasn't pinned or crushed and was able to find my way out. I used up a lifetime's worth of luck in that one incident. Story 6. I used to occasionally go to late-night casinos with a mate who was pretty big on gambling and strippers. I don't like strip clubs. I always play low-bet value roulette, with a hard limit I set before I go in, usually 20 to 40 pounds. Nothing went my way, and I was cleaned out before 5 minutes passed, barring one last 50-pence chip. I put it square on one number, which came in. Then I won again, and again. I don't remember much more, but I do remember walking into the kitchen the next day to find nearly 4,000 pounds on my counterpoint. Most of it still in the foil envelopes the casino gets it supplied in. I just want to say, if you're going to gamble, do it like this guy. And I don't mean win, although, yeah, that's a pretty good idea too. But like, hard limit before you go in the casino and sticking to it, very important. Gambling should be fun if you're gonna do it, and it should never feel like you have to win back your money. Story 7. I lost my phone while we were laying pipe at work. Filled in the trench and then realized I had lost it somewhere in the 60 feet of trench we dug. Left it there overnight, seeing as it was already dark and I couldn't hear it when I called it. Returned the next day with the listening equipment. Took an extremely lucky guess on where it was located and found it within 30 minutes. Dug 2.5 feet down to find that the only damage was a small crack on my screen protector and a scuff on my OtterBox. Everyone, including me, had written it off to never be recovered. Took 2 hours of my time when I figured it would take me a week to find it. Story 8. About 15 years ago, I had to go to Vegas for a work thing. I had no extra money, so I wasn't really excited about going. Being broke in Vegas is no fun. I was there for 3 nights. First night, I decided I would play in a $50 poker tournament. It would fill up the evening, and that way I wouldn't gamble anywhere else. Bam. Took first place for $1,500. Being responsible, I went and put $1,000 in my bank and kept $500 to play with. The next night, I go to a craps table with $200, and I go on for about a 45-minute roll. This was at the Paris where they have the fire bet, which is a $10 bet that if you hit all 6 points, it's a 1,000 to 1. I hit that over the course of the 45 minutes, and if you know anything about craps, it becomes exponential as you press your wins. So starting with a typical $10 pass line and $20 odds and like $12 on a 6 or 8, by the time I'd finally sevened out, I had $500 on each number and was hitting them over and over. Cashed out with $28,000. The final night, I did it again. Just went on a 30-minute run. Hit another fire bet, but since I was up so much, I had started at a $25 minimum game. Another $18,000. I basically parlayed $50 into $46,000, which was more than my annual pay at the time. That will never happen again. Story 9. I was around 8 and was at a community center to see a play. After the play, they were hosting a raffle, so I got my grandparents to buy me a few tickets. Now, the weird part? I won every prize. Every single one of them. I had only a handful of tickets, and there were 100+ people in the room participating. I ended up giving some of them back to the raffle people because it wouldn't be fair for me to get all of them. And can you imagine a young girl and her grandparents having to carry all these prizes out? It's unrealistic. Prizes were a giant stuffed bear, wine, bath stuff, more wine, more bath stuff, some chocolates, etc. Story 10. Came out of university and I didn't have a job. I was applying for jobs in video editing and media, however, I hardly got any interviews. About 4 months of having no job, I went to my final interview. I said to myself that if I don't nail this one, I'm signing on to a minimum wage job agency. Unfortunately, I didn't get it. So the next day, I went down and signed on to the job agency. They told me they have a job in a factory that designed and printed boxes and I could start tomorrow. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was money in the bank. I was there for a few months and a job came up in their graphics department. I went for it and I got it. I've been there for nearly 3 years now and I've already had a promotion. I've had all in-house training and I honestly couldn't be happier. I truly believe someone was looking out for me to give me this opportunity. Story 11. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to tell this story. I'm a guy. My real life name is a unisex one and in fact more commonly a female name. Also, my last name is obviously non-white. This will be important later. This was back in the mid-2000s when I was a senior in undergrad. I held a scholarship worth $5,000 a year from first year onwards. And one of the conditions of me keeping the scholarship from year to year was maintaining a high enough GPA, somewhere between an A and an A-. Well, in third year, my GPA was just below the threshold, so I ended up losing it for my final year. However, there was an appeals process you could write a letter to and argue your case about why you should get your scholarship back. So I wrote this letter coming up with as much BS as I could muster. I was a math major, so I was taking harder classes than average. My GPA was well above the threshold the last 2 years, so this was only a blip. My girlfriend was going through personal problems during the year, so I spent a lot of time and energy supporting her. Probably a few more things, but they were the biggies. Turns out my brother had a friend who was the student rep on the scholarship appeals committee. My bro said that he would get his friend to do all she could to reinstate my scholarship. It probably couldn't be anything drastic, but she said she would try to steer the discussion of the decision in a positive direction. A few weeks later, they mail me a check for $5,000 and congratulate me on retaining my scholarship. Rad. So I invite my brother's friend for coffee to thank her, but it turned out she had nothing to do with the decision. Turns out the committee members thought I was a girl. Oh look, a girl who missed out on her scholarship. Oh, she's a math major too. We want to support women in science, so we should really consider her case. And look, she has a girlfriend. How can we not support an LGBT woman in science? She's such a role model for other queer women, and look at her last name. She's a visible minority too. Let's support her as much as we can. Apparently, there was even a discussion about increasing my scholarship too. My brother's friend had to subtly kibosh that idea for my own good. Best, they didn't find out the truth. OP's brother's friend must have been losing their minds in that meeting. I don't know if I would be able to keep a poker face in that. I don't even know what I'd be thinking. That's incredible. This is hilarious. Maybe I would feel somewhat bad if I didn't think that university pricing and that kind of stuff is just all garbage anyway. But because it is, I don't feel bad at all. This is a hilarious story, OP. Story 12. When I was about 13, I was playing this game with my 7-year-old cousin where you throw a ring and try to get it to land on the stick. We played for so long and not once did any of us land the ring on the stick. Then his mom called his name, so he left to see what she wanted. When he was gone, I took the ring and put it on the stick. When he came back, I said, "Look, I landed it." He didn't believe me and asked me to show him how I did it and do it again, calling my bluff. I wouldn't back down, so I took the ring and threw it, and it landed right on the frickin' stick. I was having a meltdown in my mind about how I just nailed it. But I played it cool and turned around, looked at him and just said, "Like that." Story 13. So it was a late-night patrol in Afghanistan. We were tasked with setting up an observation post for the night on a hill above a particularly active area of the city we were in. We would be there for almost the entire night. This was an area we knew to be pretty active for IEDs. Now everywhere we went on patrol, we had the first guy sweeping with a metal detector looking for signs of IEDs, and this night was no exception. When we got to a good vantage point, we were designated spots. And as I was carrying a saw, I was placed on a berm facing down a road/trail that led up the hill. Before we got into our position, our combat engineer would sweep the area around our spot to ensure there were no IEDs. He started at the far left of the squad, working his way toward the road where I was at with my team leader. It was late and I was tired of standing, so I went to get in a position anyway. As I set my saw down on the small berm, I heard my combat engineer shout, mind you, we're supposed to be quiet on this operation, to "Hold the frick on!" He skipped the next 3 or so positions and came straight to mine. So I sigh, pick my saw up off its bipods, and he makes his first pass right over where my weapon was. Beep. Whatever intuition he had stopped me from laying down on an IED big enough to dismantle a Humvee, let alone what it would have done to little old me. We ended up spending the rest of the night in a cordon around the sucker until EOD showed up and did a controlled detonation. I have other times where I was pretty lucky, but this one takes the cake. OP, I gotta ask, what do you mean you were tired? You didn't want to stand anymore, so you're gonna do something incredibly risky that could put not only you, but everyone around you at risk. Come on. I think OP almost made a huge screw up here. Glad it didn't happen though. Truly was a big stroke of luck. Story 14. When I was in trauma surgery in upstate New York, got a notification about a man who was shot 3 times in the head. He comes in, literally one eye hanging out of the socket, blood everywhere. He's slumped forward. Apparently he was shot in the temple, the nose, and in the cheek, with exits out of the right eye socket, roof of the mouth, and side of the head, respectively. At this point, I'm thinking they just brought him in so we can pronounce him in the ER, because he looked dead. I go to examine him and tilt his head back. He says, "Yo, be gentle." I jump back and scream like a little boy, as did everyone in the room. Literally, the bullets missed his brain in every single shot. Story 15. The way my wife and I met was pretty lucky. I first met her at a conference lunch. The staff at the hotel restaurant was just sitting us at any open table. My wife and her colleagues' table had 2 spots left, and I was sat at the table I was at by myself. My wife and her colleagues' table had 2 spots left, and I was sat at the table as I was by myself. I sat right across from her and we talked the whole time. After lunch, I went back to my conference meetings and workshops and didn't see her. That night, there was a reception and I wound up bumping into her again. We talked and talked, didn't eat and didn't drink anything, but it didn't matter. We really hit it off. We exchanged email addresses at the end of the night and went our separate ways. The next day, the conference is over and I return home. I tried to email her, but the email bounced back. I couldn't believe it. I thought she gave me the wrong email. I was pretty bummed. So 1 year later, I go to another conference in a totally different industry in a different city. I went to the auditorium to attend the keynote address. I chose to sit on the left side because that was where the exit doors were, and I wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible afterwards. I sit down, and who do you think is sitting in front of me? Yep, my future wife. I don't think she noticed me until we had to do an exercise that was part of the keynote where we stood up and had to shake hands with the people around us. Needless to say, she was really surprised. We couldn't talk then because we were at the address, so I said we would talk after. When the keynote ended, I left the auditorium to wait for her outside. It seems she went out a different exit and I didn't see her. I waited there for like 15 minutes. At that point, I panicked because I really wanted to talk to her again. So I called the front desk and asked them to put me through to her room. At first, the front desk said they didn't have anybody of that name staying at the hotel, but in the end they found her room and put me through. Luckily, she picked up. Later, I would find out that she was just about to leave as I called. I invited her out for a drink later that night, and the rest is history. We've been married 15 years. This is the most adorable rom-com whatever thing I've ever read that actually happened. This is unbelievably cute. And also, yeah, incredibly lucky. And look, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little jealous. But congratulations, OP. I'm glad things worked out so well. Story 16. When I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, there was a saying, "The trail provides," and that was the mantra of my trip. Whenever I would lose/run out of an essential item, within a couple days there would be that exact item waiting at a shelter. This happened with headlamps, water bottles, pack, cover, and weed. I found whenever I would do something for the trail, spend the day picking up trash, clear downed trees, etc., the trail would find a way to do something for me, including beer caches, gear, awesome hitches, and so much more. Honestly, it started to become weird how often it happened and how there isn't an explanation for it at all. It really helped me let go of my fear of backpacking alone and be more trusting and to not stress about minimal things that are out of my control. I could go on and on about trail magic. Story 17. Probably not the greatest, but looking back, I can't believe what I took for granted. I had parents that even through a rough marriage and financial crisis found the time for their children. They taught me the importance of ethics, discipline, and good grades. I became number 10 out of my senior graduating class. I ran not the best in high school, but some coach I never met randomly emailed me to see if I wanted to run in college. Not just any college, but a highly praised engineering school. I did that for a few years and then decided I wanted to join the army. Found my school had an amazing ROTC program and got a full ride. Looking back, I believe I had the 1 in a million parents that instilled the ethics and discipline for all of this to happen. I had to work my butt off for all of it, but if I grew up with the different parents, I can't see any of this ever happening. I guess I was lucky. I love you, and I miss you, Mom and Dad. Thank you for everything. This is just the sweetest one to end on. Just a little reminder to not take the things around you for granted. I feel like being thankful and recognizing when you've been really lucky is good for you in some way. I can't even explain how. It just feels right in my brain. I feel like it keeps you humble almost. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure that this question is going to have a lot of people in the comments sharing their own stories, so I'll make sure to read them, don't worry. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful and lucky day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.